Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here, the afternoon of Sunday the 24th of November. So, as promised, a bit of late than never, I said I'd get back onto the Fury. Just recently I've spent a lot of time on the lightning in the background to get that on the way. But as of now we've got to a point where we've got the timing case and the primary case just about sorted out. We're still waiting for the barrels, which are being lined and bored, and I'll chase those up next week. But in the meantime it means we can go back to the Fury. So just to recap, for a lot of people that are relatively new to the channel, and thanks very much for recent subscriptions. A long while ago, in 1991, I managed to prize the 1970 BSA Fury from Vale Onslow in Birmingham. It had been on display there in their shop since it was lent to them by the factory to publicise the model in early 1971. It's the actual bike that was displayed at the 1971 range launch at the Royal Lancaster Hotel in London on November the 10th, I think it was, in 1970. As I say, ended up at Vale Onslow. I'd been there several times as I realised a lot of other people had to view the bike. I was a friend of Owen Wright's, who included it in his book about BSA, and ultimately in 1991 I was over there taking some photos of it and just caught the brothers at the right time, I think, where they needed some cash for a particular job, etc. I offered them, I made them an offer which at the time they didn't accept immediately, but they did state that if I left them my contact details they'd get in touch. I never expected to hear from them again, but actually within 2 weeks they did get in touch. They asked for a bit more than I originally offered, so they could split the money 3 ways between the brothers, and I did manage to scrape the cash together and get it out. And the original intention then was that I would try and secure the parts to actually make that show bike into a runner. So the 1970 Fury Roadster, that a lot of you have seen the introduction video on, is purely for show and has no engine internals, but obviously as it appears to be a complete bike, then it does have a lot of the scarce parts associated with those motors, namely the cases. Anyway, as I started to scour various sources for parts and started to accumulate some of the more common ones, I came across a gentleman who had a large stock of them that he'd collected over 10 or more years, and was wanting to sell. Actually more, probably 20 years, and that gave me enough parts actually to build up another bike. So I decided to leave the original show bike as it was, original unrestored, as a piece of history. I do show it and exhibit it and get lots of fantastic anecdotes from people that are very interested in it. But it gave me then the opportunity to build up a bike from scratch, a second one, and I've chosen to do this in SS guise with the high pipes and all the bits and pieces that distinguish an SS from a roadster. So the rolling chassis is already done, and the first fit on the motor has been completed as well. And the next part now is to basically strip this motor and undertake the final clean build on it. There are one or two things still to do on it. There is a bit of machining left to do on the head for valve guides and tappets, but other than that, it's all done. Also, as you can see, I'm on a GoPro. Dug the GoPro out today, which gives me a bit more of a wide-angle view of the whole garage. You can see the Lightning at the far end and the Rocket 3 on the left-hand side. You can just see the front of the Fury SS rolling chassis on the bench behind me here. But anyway, what I'm going to do is, firstly, there's just one or two bits and pieces I need to do to this with respect to screws, etc. As you might have seen from my other bikes, I do like originality when I can do it. I'm not an absolute stickler for it, but I am going to use Phillips, or crossheads I should say, rather than Allen screws. So all I want to do first is to just get all the screws together, because essentially we want the full kit together before we strip, and we can keep it all together then. When we begin the build. As you can see on this one, on the Fury, the electric starter was an optional extra, and the starter motors themselves are a fairly common Lucas one fitted to other models. But the key thing and unique thing to the Fury is firstly the starter gearbox, and secondly the Sprag clutch as well. And although certain parts got out the factory, it was thought that Sprag clutches were never made. However, if you go back to the Motorcycle Sport Quarterly tests from early 1971, when a group from America came over to visit the factory, then there was a Fury SS then on test, and it was electric start, and it was working according to the text write-up. So they were produced, but they're pretty scarce. But we have on this actually managed to recreate one from other parts. It was thought as well at the time. There's been a few anecdotes around the fact that the original Sprag clutches, the original ones that were produced for testing purposes, weren't man enough for the job, so they did incur quite a number of failures. But anyway, there we go. All I wanted to do there was just get those short crossheads on there, because they've only recently arrived. Getting the right crossheads these days is actually a bit of a nightmare, as you can imagine. You can get certain kits for certain bikes, but obviously it's not going to happen for the Fury. So what I'm going to do now then is firstly take the covers off, and then we'll take the head off. The head isn't bolted down yet; it's just in position on its studs. But the first thing that we have noticed as well when we need to rebuild is that two studs are longer than the others. So the two studs on this end are longer than the other 6, and the two longer ones have been put at the wrong end by the engineer who did the boring on this for me before I did the honing, etc. Ultimately to finish it off, so that needs changing around. So we've got a notebook handy to make sure we make a note of all this for the final build. So I'll get the covers off and I'll bring you back. Okay, covers off, and cam tunnel cover off, levers off. You can see the cams there. The cam retaining plate is off, and then these cams just slide out with a bit of twisting. If I get a bit of rag. There we go. Of course, that exhaust cam has got the spindle on it to drive the auto advance. Inlet. Other than driving the auto advance on the other end of the cam, both cams are exactly the same. Right, next job will be to just tap the head off, and you can see it's loose as it is actually done. And what we can do next then is I'm going to unscrew everything from the barrels. There is an internal. There was an internal one, but that's for the head onto the barrels, which we need to do on assembly. So we'll take the covers off and we'll take the barrels off. What we need to make sure is that, as some of you may have seen on previous videos, spent a lot of time honing the barrels to the correct bore size for each of the pistons, so we need to make sure we get the pistons in the right way round and that these are properly marked up. Also, there's no head gasket on a Fury. What they use are these crushable rings, and luckily I've got a few of those in stock. Obviously I've not tightened the head down on these two, so they're good, so we'll leave them in there for now. All these parts I'm keeping together obviously in the same storage boxes with all the screws, so I'll do some more screws and take some more covers off, and we'll crack on. Okay, timing cover off, gearbox outer cover off. You have to be very careful with this one because the oil seals for the end feed on the crank. But now what we'll do, before we take this gearbox inner cover off, I've got a feeling that because bearings and things are quite tight over here, it'll probably be easier to take this out and let all the gear cluster etc. come with it. So I'm going to turn it round and take the cover off on the other side, and we'll strip the primary drive first, and then also we can get the starter off once we've done that, and that's quite heavy, so that'll take a bit of weight out of the motor as well. So we'll get cracking on this side. Okay, cover off. Primary cover I should say, and you can see just how busy it is in there. As I say, to those that you are pretty new to the channel, there's a whole series of videos of this when I was doing the first fit, so you'll get all the details of it, so I won't go into too much just now. Only that the first fit was purely that, so we need the reason for stripping is to take it down, clean it all up, make sure tolerances, final tolerances are correct, and also fit everything up with respect to, for instance, tab washers, etc., which are all here, but obviously we've not fully installed. This primarily was just to get all the right parts in the same place as well, with respect to the first build. So, next job is to take the stator off and the rotor, and then we can take the sprag clutch off and also the sprocket off the starter that's just held on by a circlip, and then following that we can take the clutch and the sprocket for the drive off, for the crankshaft sprocket off. There's one unit as well, so we'll get on with that next. Okay, there we are, primary drive off. As I said, to get all the details of the components and the way that they're installed, then feel free to zip back through the videos of the initial build of this. But that was a bit easier than I thought it might be. Everything came off nice and cleanly. One subscriber did mention that obviously as these parts weren't originally mated, then it'd be a good idea to lap the clutch basket in on the clutch centre in on its taper, and yes, that's a good suggestion. Thank you for that. So we'll do that on the build up. As batteries are all getting a bit low on this side now, then we'll probably call it a day today, with us achieving that. I've had quite a busy period in the garage actually, and unusually for me, I've just about had my fill I think this weekend. We'll do a bit of tidying up, and then hopefully during the week we'll complete stripping this down. The next part will be to pull the gearbox out with the inner cover. That should come out almost as one piece. I've left the barrels on for now because I don't want to damage the pistons, so we can be careful with that when we take it apart. But that's only taken an hour or so, or probably a bit less, to do that. So pretty straightforward. Oh, one final last thing to mention is I said at the beginning of the video that some of the the camera keeps turning off. I said at the beginning of the video that the head stubs are the wrong way around, so these two longer ones should be at this end. So we've made a note of that, and it's all going on here at the minute. I normally play music in the background. I don't when I'm videoing because we'll be up for copyright strikes all over the place, and you'll be hearing an awful lot of stranglers. But anyway, I'll stop waffling on. We'll end it there, and I'll see you in a few days at a time, hopefully, to finish this off. Thanks very much for your interest, for any comments, for any subscriptions. Thanks again, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye bye.